All right, so today this is just a short continuation taking a look at, again, this would be essentially like a part 3, looking at these, the futuristic jet or whoosh type pass-by sounds, which I've continued to elaborate on, and I just thought I would break down even more of the process, how I'm kind of evolving it from the point that I decided to turn it into a library, okay? So I have a bunch of the finished or more or less the finished assets prior to mastering here. So I just thought I'd show you some of the cool stuff that I came up with. So in my folder here I have T1 material and then T2. So I use like a tier system. So the tier 1 stuff is like it's from the initial design session that it comes out, and then I'm generally happy with that. It's generally stuff that will include in a library, or I'll at least embed it into my own library. So some of this we've heard. So Jet Whoosh 1, this I believe is the actual original one from the video. Right? So then some things I did, for more utility, is I decided let's have a seamless loop for each one of these types. So it's not going to loop inside the browser window, but it is a seamless loop. It just sounds like the vehicle is consistently traveling. And then I was like, well, what else, what other kind of utility might I want to get out of this? So I have an acceleration, like kind of like a rocket blast, or imagine there's like a rocket behind it that, it cuts on, and then it's going to be like kind of almost like an impact, and then it'll trail with a tail on it. So that's so we'll have a look at how I made these sounds here. All right, because they were kind of derivative from these. So I started with the whooshes, and then I did some things to transform them into having this boom effect on there. And I was like, well, okay, you'll see better in the process. But when I made it, I was like, well, we could have it with the tail, but you know what? I might want it without that tail on there. So here's just the boom as well. Pretty cool. Right? And then I was like, well, what else is this thing going to do? So maybe there's a startup and a shutdown sequence. So I didn't get too carried away. I just kind of thought in more broad strokes, to the point where it can be used standalone probably, but you could also easily incorporate it as a layer. So here's the startup. All right, and the shutdown. Right, so we got a couple variations. Oh, just lost my spot. So startup, and so on. So that's enough to bring you up to speed to where I can now show you how I went and created the acceleration with the boom. And then also, let me go back to this other folder here and show you this material. So the T2 material, this is where actually what I did was I took from the T1 folder. So you can see I have all the different types. So Jet Whoosh Type 1. So not the final naming convention, but that type you can think of as like a vehicle name, all right? And then you go to Type 2, Type 3, right? All these vehicles, they're different, okay? They're different vehicles, or different imaginary vehicles anyway. So the T2 material or tier 2 material is where then I took those finished assets, brought them into a new session, recombined those in interesting ways, and then created even more flavor variations between those two combined. So this is, I believe this is, okay, so I have it written here. This is a recombination of type 1 and 5. So that means 1 and 5 are baked in. And I made ambient sounds, I made some weird digital sounds, and I made some distorted versions, and so forth. So here's just a couple of those. Ambient, distorted. All right. movement. This is just, I wanted to have a little, I don't like to incorporate a lot of panning in my stuff because you don't know how it's going to be used. So oftentimes I try not to do too much panning. But I thought it'd be cool to have one that goes from, left to right. Tonal. So this is just some weird, almost, I actually ran it through a vocoder. So that kind of thing. And anyway, so that's a good overview. So now let's actually look at how some of these were created, because the process is, it's worthy of note. So let me get out of here. I'm not importing this. Okay, so what I have pulled open first is the recombination to make an ambient version of, so here you have the Jet Whoosh 1, and maybe let me bypass these plugins. So here's just the Jet Whoosh 1 final effects from the first session, or actually from the session that I showed you in the prior video, if you watch these in sequence. So yeah, there's no effects on these. I'm just taking them together and layering them. And then here's, this would have been Jet Whoosh 5 right here. All right. So what I did is pulled them in here, stacked them up against each other. And basically what I did was, after they were stacked, because again, those two final acids were different enough to where they weren't going to, the transients aren't going to line up perfectly or anything. So of course you can there's different things you could do. I probably could have done this just with Snap Heap like I had been, but Envy is great for this too. So Envy, I have a preset here. All right. That's definitely not it. Okay, so I analyzed the top one. All right, I just decided to use that as my base. And then I applied that down to this bottom layer. So it's already been done. You can see it's in the title here. But that's all I really did, was I just kind of lined those up. I probably did some with the smoothing and, made it so that it wasn't, sometimes you have them too locked together, it doesn't feel like there's any breathing room. So I probably played with that a bit, but more or less you can see that those envelopes stack up 100%. And I did that across the board. Okay, so that's step one. So I suppose if I really wanted to get carried away with myself, I could have done a lot of processing in these two layers as well, but these are already processed sounds. So I was just like, all right, what can I do with these? And then build off the back of it. So I was like, well, let's do different aesthetics. So here's where I was like, what can I do? I can do ambient, I did distorted, and I did the weird tonal, and all those that I showed you just a moment ago. So how I approached this one is I have just a small chain of effects on here. I got the spring reverb, which we can go through them in sequence. We'll do that. We'll do that for this one at least, because I know it gets to be a lot. All right, so again, the idea of this one is supposed to be ambient sounding, so a lot of verb on here. And then spring going into a black hole. Let's just look at spring for a second and see what it's doing. Oh, okay, so I did do some automation with that spring reverb. So again, anytime you can add some movement, even subtly, it's gonna increase the complexity in a nice way. So the mix and the tension, and then the speed of the tremolo effect. So you can hear it doing that. Black hole. So this is heavy in the mix, and this is where I was really it's like, all right, let's, black hole is always great. I mean, how many more times do I really need to say it? It's, if you just want something that sounds like it's going forever, this is the reverb. Right? So just kind of smoothing out the frequencies a bit. So very much more whoosh-like in a sense. Now I can go down here. Now this is an interesting one. I really like this from Eventide, the Quadravox, which there's another cool trick I've came up to do with this, which I'll save for another time because it's not set up here. But just have it doing like a little bit of a chord. Just adding some pitch depth to it. It's really low in the mix, but if I can crank it up. So it's just kind of adding a little depth to it. I kind of even I had it really low in the mix. I kind of like it even there. right. And a little plate. So again, you know, this one right here, it's like I got basically 4 different reverbs. All right. And then I have a little bit of a mastering chain on here, probably a little light EQing and so forth. Crank that back down. It's affecting my volume, my gain staging. All right, so here's that. All right, here's some of the longer ones. All right, so then here I can show you which one should we look at. Distorted layer. Yeah, we'll look at the distorted layer. All right, so here's what we got going on here. Just play it as is. So again, these are the idea with these additional iterations is that you're just really going for it, really creating some very wild, over the top. So yeah, it's a lot of distortion. But that could really come in handy somewhere down the line. I'm just trying to create options for myself in building the library. So I've got 2 well, you know what? We can hear it without these on. And again, this is also a recombination of type 1 and type 5. Envy, still the same process, just kind of meshing the 2 types together. And then we got double decapitator, probably one with focus on the dark side of things. All right. Another one, focus more on the brighter side with a different style incorporated. All right, terrific. And then trash 2, which I'm using, I am using a trash preset, and I am using the convolve module as well. Nothing really special to say about it, other than I was like, well, let's take these 2, run it into a trash, like a preset. So I just ran through some presets until I found something that was kind of interesting, tweaked it a bit. I believe I tweaked the some of the shaping here. All right. Of course, you could play with that wet dry, you know. So there's what trash is. Maybe turn the trash off, leave the convolve module on. In a way, I like that. Yeah, so I mean, there's definitely room to try different things. Sometimes I'll bounce out multiple versions of an effect if I just can't decide if I really like one way and another way. But I try to kind of stick to something here. Traveler, I mean, there's already Traveler happening on both of these in the original design, but I think I just did this to kind of add something additional. It's actually mostly for the attenuation purposes, so I'm not adding any additional Doppler effect to it. It's kind of moving in an interesting direction away from it. Here's some of the other options, some of the longer ones. And then, of course, your seamless loop. All right, perfect. So these are just 5-second seamless loops. There's different approaches that you can do with these seamless loop. Some people like to make shorter loops and then set them up to, if you're putting it in a game engine, you can have it set so that the loops, maybe you have 3 or 4 2-second loops, and then they randomize. So each time it comes back around, it's a different loop. You can have just a long loop. But I thought for the purposes of just like a library, general library, a 5-second length loop is just kind of generally okay. It's not really much trouble if you want to make a longer loop. All the material is there. I chopped the material from these other assets to make those loops. So, you know, each their own as far as the loops go, but nonetheless, a nice feature added. Let me go ahead and hide these. All right, is there any others that I would like to take a look at? This one, okay. I have like this weird, I have this running joke with myself, and that in itself sounds strange, of course. But all the time when I'm making libraries, if I'm ever doing anything that has a lot of distortion or in something like digital and crunchy sounding, there's always, I have multiple libraries now where I have assets that are named digital bees. So digital bees is like one of my favorite descriptive terms for assets. I don't know, I have no idea where it came from, but here is digital bees for you. Let's take a listen to this one. So yeah, it's not, I mean, this one is on the edge of me calling it digital bees, but again, it's like a whole like weird subcategory thing that I have going on that goes across multiple libraries. Now, what is going on here? Well, again, you have the same similar thing with the envelope follower. That was kind of like a standard procedure that I used for this tier of effects. And then, excuse me, unfiltered audio, spec ops. This is basically, if I had to call a plugin digital bees, this plugin is basically, if you want to make a weird digital distortion and just, you know, completely ruin the sound that's coming out of it. Spec Ops is very glitchy and weird in that kind of way. So we can take a look and see what it's doing. So we've got some freezing, got some dust storm. Maybe I could play with the amounts a little. That starts at 10K, of course. Right, so I messed up my values, of course, at this point, but mix all the way. Got some, what's going on here? So input follower, I've got a sequencer also shifting the pitch. And then the slide. So you can read the description there for what the slide is. It's better than what I could tell you. And then the freeze, so have it freezing the signal periodically, all right? So yeah, that's what this thing's doing. It's just doing all kinds of weird glitchy stuff that we don't have a lot of vocabulary that makes sense for. RC20, so this is a cool little, it's just kind of adding a whole other layer onto the distortion. I believe I've covered this prior, but you basically have these little modules built into RC20. So you have a noise module that has a built-in envelope follower. So I can show you that. Let's go ahead and turn these ones off. So I crank the noise. You hear it's following if I turn it down. So you can kind of control how much of the noise follows it. And it's 8-bit noise. There's different types in here, all kinds. Right? That's a nice little showcase of that one. But then I've got the wobble effect, some distortion. Right? Digital. So this is going to be like a bit crusher almost. But it allows you to kind of, I guess it's like a crossfade in between the sample rate and bit depth, affecting either side. So you can kind of go between. And then space, just a little ambience. And I like this. This particular RC20 is really cool because it's simple enough. You have a number of different effects really just right at your fingertips there. And then also it just has the controls that you would want and none of the bloating, right? So just if you need to do something aesthetically very quickly and you kind of want to flip between different options. I know sometimes I sound like I'm a commercial for these, but I'm just kind of showing you the tools that I found that help me out in different situations. And this is one of those. It's definitely It's relatively inexpensive and does add some nice utility to what you might not already otherwise have. So space, a little bit of reverb. And this doesn't sound a whole lot like the original, but I did want to, at least with one of these, kind of go a little more in depth and talk about some of my parameters, which I can't always do. It's just not possible to get through it all that way. And, or I mean, I guess it would be, but you want to watch 2 hours of that? Because I could go on for 2 hours, which maybe some people would, you know, or maybe I'll try it sometime, but not this time. So I'm going to turn this one off. How long is this right now? Oh, we're at a great place right now. All right. So I think that gives you a fair enough idea about some of those second tier aesthetic experiments that I started doing with the library or with the grouping of sounds. It's kind of like it's like a work in progress library. So it's got everything I need in there so far. I think someone just rang my doorbell. Definitely not answering that. Okay, so moving on to so how we did the acceleration and then that booming effect. And then what else was there? Oh, then there was the charge up and down. So let's go to the acceleration effect here. Okay, so let's kind of go with the first thing here, which is the actual impact sound. Now, this impact sound I didn't create entirely from scratch in the context of this project. What I did was I actually have another project I'm also working on where I was making a lot of impact sounds. So I'm like, hey, this will work here. But in any case, you could take any impact sound that you want and do similar process to what I'm doing here. So here's the impact, and I have some effects on it, but it really, you know, it's a primal tap. These are just for flavor that I thought would help it mesh better with the whole sound in its entirety. Did I minimize that? Okay, there we go. All right, so there's my little impact. All right. Let me mute these on the main aux. So you got some decapitator. You know, nothing surprising for an impact. And I'm not really showing you the full design of that impact, but that's, I'll probably be covering that also in the future, which I suppose is good for you to know. I do have a lot of ideas that I will continue to go on sharing for these. And then, so what's down here is actually what's the important thing. So you see there's 2 additional tracks or 2 additional layers. Actually, both layers have the same sound source on. So one is, so again, these are the Jet Whoosh. So this is the Jet Whoosh 1. So this is the impact sounds for Jet Whoosh 1. And so this first one, I took the original whoosh file and I processed it, at least this first portion here, I processed with Envy so that it would mesh with that impact sound. So if we want to listen to those together, we can. All right. And there's also a snap heap on here because if you look first layer, I've got a bus send coming out of there that's actually acting as a side chain. So I'm doing multiple, with this track, I'm actually doing multiple layers of envelope following. So Envy is doing something to follow the envelope. And then also I have snap heap following the envelope. You can see the gain is set down here. And it's doing a little bit. So it's kind of just some additional gain staging. But I also had that feeding in there so I could do something interesting with effects. So this comb filter. All right. So again, making some movement on this layer. So if I, let me make this pre-fader. So there's the Jet Whoosh with all my envelope follower effects. Now, bottom Jet Whoosh down here is set up with some additional or different effects. And then this is just, I was kind of trying to make it so that I really wanted the tail of this effect to have a certain length and a certain feel to it so that it could kind of mesh well if you're going to put a one of the seamless loops over top or something, right? If it gets used in a game engine, or, just kind of so that all these effects can mesh together nicely. So it's a little complicated with how I was doing the tail processing, but yeah, so here's the other layer. Similar thing. This one, actually, the gain is set pretty high. So I'm just doing a little bit of modulation there. But you can hear both tails together. Both of them doing slightly different things, just add a little bit of a depth to the overall effect so that it's not so squished together. All right. And then, of course, everything all together. Right? So it's got a nice boost. And then some traveling sound there in the tail. Now, also, manipulator and traveler. Okay. So this, what are we doing? Very light processing here because we've already used these effects a couple times. But I did do it again. So we're kind of stacking it on another time with everything meshing together. And it just kind of brings it together a little. And then a little bit of mastering, or I really can't call that mastering. I'm just controlling the dynamics and a little light EQing. So I won't say mastering. All right. And then as we go through. So just some nice sounding effects. And then after I ran through that, I was like, well, let's have some without the tail. So that's all this is. This is just a shortened version of the other one, just no tail. Right? So that way you have a little flexibility with it. All right. Let's hide that. Move on to the next one. So the start and stop. Maybe slightly, I don't want to say disappointing, but again, I had some charge effects already built. Okay. So this first layer is my charge effect on its own. Just let me pull these. All right. And there's the corresponding, not charge, but the startup and shutdown. So these startup and shutdowns you're hearing were, they were already, again, from another concurrent project I'm working on. So I was like, well, let's try them out and see how they go in context of a greater whole. So that's all that is. They're the same the whole way through. Just a couple different variations is what you'll get. Then again, using the NV plugin, I copied the envelope from the charge, right? And then applied it down to the actual, hold on. So there's the actual jet sound. Again, like the aesthetic with it, we've kind of already established is present in that charge or startup sound. Again, side chaining. So multiple stages of envelope control for the volume mostly. And also there's a phaser in here. Again, movement, adding some complexity to the sound. Complexity is what I mean. So phaser, the rate and the depth are being modulated here. And the gain also. So that in conjunction with what Envy is already done. All right, so then what you do is bounce all that out. So this would basically be, because this is an aux here, so you commit that, or I committed that, and then I have this, okay? All right, so this is just the mix down of everything we have so far. All right, and then for further processing, I exported that out, and we're gonna have to, let me pause the Pro Tools for a second. All right, so I exported those out, and I brought them into Isotope RX. And because there's in Isotope RX, the variable pitch module that's in here, I really like what it does. So when you select your audio, you can actually control semitones. So it's almost like, it's variable pitch, so it's like the same as like a tape stop plugin would almost be, but you can do more interesting things in terms of controlling how it varies. So you can draw these little curves, and that's what I did, which this one already has it baked in, but just so you can see, I don't even know what this is going to be, but it's going to let me do it. Right? So you get the idea. So after doing my processing in RX, close that down. Don't need to save it or anything. So I did the processing, and then that's what this track is right here. So this one, this is this top one now with the RX pitch processing or post-pitch processing on there. So let's have that. Let's hear that. Okay. All right. So what else is going on here? All right. So now all of the RX processing accomplished. Some additional pitch and traveler. Mostly for in this case, the Doppler effect, but also I have this LFO that's built into Traveler controlling a tremolo mix and rate. Right? Again, just gluing everything together, adding some additional depth. There's always, I like to add depth in multiple stages, in case you haven't noticed at this point. It just forces you to, like, if you're doing it in stages, then you're kind of committing to a set of parameters, and then you got to move on. So I can't go back and tweak like the 20 or 30 other effects that may have led into this. So I think there's, there's always different types of limitations you can set up for yourself. But I think whatever they are, it is valuable to kind of set some kind of limitation. Otherwise, it's just, you can't have too much chaos. All right. There's got to be a balance between, having a little bit of chaos where you're, creative, and then having some order where you try to actually make something. Because otherwise you just make stuff forever and then it's not done. Anyway, I'll stop with that little mini rant for now. Little light processing, and then I put black hole in here. Nothing actually I don't think was baked in, but it was something I was just kind of curious. I just had an idea about, so it's on there. And I don't have the others in the session, but I can also show you, and they're not named quite yet, I don't think. T1 material. So here is, are they in here? Start and stop. So this is for a third, or Jet Whoosh 3. So these are the start stops for Jet Whoosh 3. And do I have any others? I have a bunch of others. They're just not exported yet. But yeah, so each of the 10 types of Jet Whoosh sounds, it's got 3 variations of the short pass or the short by, and then 6 longer ones, and then a seamless loop, and then your start and stop, and then also the impact or traveling sound, both with and without tail. So I thought those were some good kind of starting places, and that's what I ended up including in the finalized what ended up becoming a library. So as I mentioned previously, if the library is something you want to pick up, I will have a link to it, and I'm doing the ones that go along with the video. It's really just a way that I can I wanted to be able to do the videos, and also I need to continue working on libraries. So this is just a way that I can maybe do a little bit of both. I won't always do them like this, but I just figure, some of these videos, if you're really enjoying them and you do want to have some way, you feel like you want to support what I'm doing and you want to see more of it, then the library will be there. So yeah, really what's most important for me is I like to get my ideas out there. I like to share these ideas with everybody. But yeah, if I can make a library out of it, why not? So here is an accidental library that I stumbled on just from from doing kind of working on and updating my reel a little bit. So yeah, thank you for watching, and I really do appreciate. I've gotten so many nice comments, and a lot of people reaching out to me and encouraging me that they really like these videos. So I just kind of started doing it about a year. Well, I started doing shorter form things, and I was like, what if I do something longer form and actually explain things a little bit more in depth? And I just didn't really, I don't know. I teach classes on audio, and it just seemed like a natural thing to try. But I'm just really kind of humbled. I'm just really glad that people are enjoying and liking what I'm putting out so far. So there's definitely more to come. And to that point, if you have ideas for things you might like to see, or maybe sometimes there's things in my videos that I might gloss over, and if enough people want me to go more in depth on something, then I'll just, I will take feedback, and always having more ideas is useful. But I will end it there. Thank you again, and take care of yourselves. And reach out to me, especially on Twitter, at SoundSparkChase. If you ever want to chat, I'm always, not always, but frequently I have time that I fortunately can spend kind of chatting with people. So thank you.